Hey guys, what's going on? Today I'll be defending my taste in books. I'm going to Goodreads and responding to some one-star reviews of my all-time favorites. I'm going to take some from my top 10 video and other more recent 9 out of 10s. Let's start with Left Hand of Darkness, my favorite book of all time, and one that I'm sure has a lot of one-star reviews. First one is from Sylvia. She says, dropping at 165 pages because this book was slumping me. This writing style is practically unreadable. There were only some scenes that I understood and only one entire chapter that was readable and engaging. I need books to be accessible, otherwise what's the point? It is my favorite book. I recommend it a lot, and more than half the time the person comes back and says I couldn't get through it. It was too heavy, it was too clunky, it was too convoluted, and I'll agree, it is. Le Guin's world building does get in the way of the accessibility of the story. She sacrifices comprehension for a little fancy flair by using a lot of box words. And I couldn't tell you why I specifically was able to slip into the narrative, but by 165 pages, if you didn't, it was the right move to DNF it. Here we got one from Lorna. She says, life's too short. I'm agreeing with all these one-star reviews so far. Alright, this one hits pretty hard. The book offends on every level. A supposed highlight in the realm of feminist sci-fi, the book populated entirely by genderless, masculine characters has nothing but derogatory remarks to make about women. I thought repeatedly, and a woman wrote this? Man, she is hard on her gender. Androgynous apparently means masculine until proven feminine, and women are degraded to baby machines as each member of this genderless race is only female when bearing children, and essentially male, except a little weepier, the rest of the time. This is the aspect of Left Hand where I feel like a bit of a phony, it being my favorite, because when you mention the book, a person will say, oh, that's the one with the genderless aliens, right? And it is, and a lot of people think that is the main aspect of the story, but to me it wasn't. I was much more involved with the greater politics of the planet and of course the main character's journey across it. And it does get tiresome when people keep trying to put modern day gender relations into the story that was written in 1969. Honestly, the only thing that the genderless aliens did for me was, when contrasted to humans, gives you another example of yin and yang, which is when two separate entities come together to form one whole entity. I don't see how you can read this book and not see the room that Le Guin gives you for non-traditional yin and yangs coming together to form one whole unit, because that seems to be what fuels a lot of these one-star reviews, is people reading it in a modern lens and getting upset at the more traditional values. And to those reviews I say, read some other science fiction from this era and you'll find real reasons to get upset, not Left Hand of Darkness, Le Guin, who is one of the more progressive authors of the time. Alright, let's try a more modern book, Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. First one we got here is from Mikey24, says, I simply could not finish this book. I read up to 97 pages and still had no idea what was going on or who these people were. I felt zero connection with any of these characters, in quotes. The writing to me was cluttered and confusing. I figured this was going to be the main complaint, was that there was no character development, which I agree with, but it had everything else in multitude. A lot of incredible ideas. I thought the writing was pretty smooth and easy to read. That is the one thing it lacked, which were definitive, interesting characters, which would be hard to do with all the time jumps that he has in this novel. So I can't say I disagree with Mikey here, but I felt like the other aspects of the book made up for that. Samuel says, despairingly cynical and utterly naive. I just disagree with that. I had a bad day and wrote that review, I guess. Brenda says, in the first chapter, I really hated the main character. She was so arrogant and unlikable. She was giving a speech and spent the whole time while she was talking thinking about how amazing she was. And then she didn't realize that she was done talking and had finished her speech. I mean, how does that even work? This is my fear because I write a lot of unlikable main characters, and I always wonder how people receive that, because they could put down the book instantly like Brenda did because I don't like this main character, I don't care what happens to her, so I'm stopping here. I guess you have to give them some redeeming qualities so that there is a little bit of empathy there, because you want the person to climb out of whatever hole they're in. If I remember right, you're not supposed to like that main character, and she's supposed to be a bit arrogant, and perhaps that hubris harms her later on in the book, but you gotta keep reading to figure that out. Alright, let's try a book that I've read since making my top 10 list, Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut, which is my new favorite Kurt Vonnegut book. I myself have to admit to writing a 1-star review of Slaughterhouse-5 back when I was in high school. Since then, it has become a 5-star read in my mind. So, you know, I gotta give some leniency towards these 1-star reviews. Caprice says, this style of writing is definitely not my cup of tea. Not enough emotion. The plot made no sense. The characters were extremely hard to relate to. The theme was very nihilistic. Yeah. Just nothing here for me to like. I don't think I can possibly give Vonnegut another chance after this. You know, sounds like Vonnegut's not for you. Seems like he understood what Vonnegut was saying and he just didn't like it. So that is a reasonable 1-star review. Aaron says, God, this was awful. I just can't handle these books that try to make a comment on humanity through a completely nonsensical story with totally unbelievable characters. I kept thinking there would be a point at the end. I was wrong. There was a point. There was definitely a point at the end. But you're right, that's what Vonnegut does, is he makes comments on humanity with nonsensical plots and characters that don't make much sense. So, yeah, not for you. Kalina says, why? Why did I buy this book? Why did I read it? Why didn't I stop reading it when it went from mildly interesting to mind-numbingly awful? Why do I do this to myself? Sounds like maybe you got the point that Vonnegut was trying to get across, which is kind of peeling back some of the unfortunate aspects of life and making you look at them in the face. And you wish you hadn't have done that. But in my opinion, I think that is good for you. That's why I like reading Vonnegut. All right, what about Old Man's War by John Scalzi? Which, to be honest, if I redid the top 10 list, I'm not sure if it would make the cut, but I know that there are a lot of 1-star reviews on this one. Peter says, flat characters and secondhand sci-fi ideas make this a dull book. It's as bland as meat and potatoes without salt, and has all the holding power of a stale magazine flip through at the doctor's office. Wow, scathing review from Peter there. There were a few novel ideas in this book, I thought. It wasn't meant to be anything revolutionary. It wasn't meant to be anything mind-blowing. It was a fast-paced adventure military sci-fi novel with aliens and guns and battles. Sure, Scalzi's exposition gets boring after a while, but I thought the plot made up for that. Alex says, this is the worst Hugo-nominated novel I've ever read. But this review was made in 2007, so there is definitely been some more stinkers since then, I'll tell you what. Jules says, so much potential ruined by glorifying war and military slaughter for a Hollywood action movie plot. That's what this book was. It was glorifying war and a big budget Hollywood military movie. What do you mean? What book did you read? What potential were you seeing? Booker starts off his review saying, this book was one that started off vaguely annoying and slowly annoyed me more and more. And I agree with that in terms of the stereotypical Scalzi snarky character who makes all these sarcastic comments, who's very flip. But then later in the book you realize they have a hard past, or they really have a heart of gold. That character does get old after a while, I'll give you that. All right, what about a newer one? Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I read Station 11 a while ago, and I didn't really get it. I wouldn't have given it a 1-star review, but maybe like a 3-star review. But then she won me over in Sea of Tranquility. But I bet there'll be a lot of 1-star reviews that were thinking the way I do, where what happens in this novel? Nothing really happens. There's not a typical plot line. Charlie Miller says, this was just absolutely dire. I'm such an idiot. I knew I should have been suspicious of all the fawning of you dip over Station 11. Just the most thrown together cardboard child's cheese. Haven't heard that one. The author even inserted herself as this god-awful mother hen character. That's what I hate about what seems to be so much of this modern young people's but it's ever so earnest type of genre. It can't just be bad like in the good old days. It has to be bad and you get mollycoddled and treated like an idiot along the way. At least that Blake Couch crap has a fairly robust and interesting sci-fi framework to work around. I'm generally very dubious about dishing out 1-star ratings as it often just feels vengeful and immature, but the fact that this author has such a large and adoring readership made this book's sloppiness and lack of originality all the more irksome. You know, I kind of know where Charlie Miller's coming from, because when I read Station 11, I had a similar feeling towards it. Like, what did I just read? It was kind of precious. It was a bit ham-fisted. But then you go online and everybody absolutely loves it. And you wonder, did you read the same book? How could it be received so differently? But, you know, I could say that about Left Hand of Darkness, where I read the book and it's clunky and convoluted and boring, and I go online and everybody is eating it up. The default response shouldn't be that they're seeing something that's not there, but rather they're seeing something that I don't. Especially with reading, with something as subjective as reading, you gotta leave room for a lot of people's opinions. Your response to a book is such a vast landscape of prior experience and prior reads. So again, I see where Charlie's coming from, but I've learned to give people more space to like things that I don't. Chloe says, DNF, if you don't get to the point within 50% of the book, I'm going to lose interest. Fair enough. Good choice in DNFing that one. Fatima says, ain't no way they're still calling chai tea 400 years into the future. Okay, is that worth a 1-star review? I guess. Dan says, a series of sketches tied together by weak science resolved unremarkably. You know, I can't argue with that. I do think the ending was a bit unremarkable, but only because it's been used in a couple of other sci-fi stories. So it didn't have like a hard-hitting wow moment for me. Okay, next I want to go to some books that I would have given a 1-star review, or at least a 2 or maybe 3-star review, and maybe find some people that I agree with. Number 1 book, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this one, Neuromancer. I could not get into that, and I think I'm going to be on the other side of the coin saying it was so clunky, it was so hard to read, how did anybody like this book? Becky says unreadable cyberpunk gibberish, which I don't agree with for Neuromancer. I would reserve that view for Snow Crash, though, by Neil Stephenson. Frida says, I was completely miserable reading this. The only thing I know about the story's plot is what I got from the text on the back of the book. I kind of agree with that. I got lost every page on this book, and at the end, I kind of knew what happened, but not really. Just didn't jive with my brain. So I do have understanding for the people that didn't jive with Left Hand of Darkness. Just different lanes on the highway in terms of our reading comprehension. All right, what about this one? Glory Road by Robert Heinlein. I'm looking for a review that says something like Heinlein's desperate attempt to cash in on fantasy without adding anything to the genre. Jay says, an incredibly tension-free picnic in the woods with your creepy nudist / free love aunt and uncle, both in their 60s with lots of warts and liver spots. An interesting take. Daniel says, good. With 1 star. All right. Darren says, I can't say anything good about this book. Larry says, sorry Heinlein, but this is boring me to tears. No plot, no story, no point continuing. First DNF of 2021. I mean, there was a plot and there was a story, but it was just so generic that it almost didn't have one. Let's go to one that I'm sure is going to be very divisive. This is How You Lose the Time War, which I read, I think, last year. One that I didn't get. You finish reading the book and you just kind of look down at the last page like, what was that? And I think I understand why, because at some point you were supposed to understand that these 2 characters were in love, but, you know, don't hate me, but I didn't buy that they were in love. And if you watch some sort of romance movie or you're reading a romance book and you get to the point where the main characters are supposed to love each other, but you don't believe that they do, then you're going to have a bad time because nothing is going to make sense and you're going to be rolling your eyes a lot. And let's find people that agree with me in my dislike for this book so that I can be satisfied in the shared animosity. Revel in the shared animosity. That's dangerous. A lot of bad things have started that way. Here we go. This, I can agree with this, and I think this will make everybody happy. Tracy says, this book made me feel really dumb. I don't think it was the book's fault. The combination of high science fiction with poetic literary fiction just didn't click together in my brain. There was never a point in this book where I knew what was going on. I just finished it and have no idea what happened in it. Exactly. Perhaps I just don't have the emotional intelligence to meld together whatever aspects of that this book was trying to put together. Another one I can agree with, Mimi says, I'm too cold-blooded to appreciate this novella in its entirety, but I'm not too dense to see that it wasn't written for the likes of me, or even with me in mind. That's enough reveling in the shared animosity. I do think it's dangerous to justify your distaste for something. It soon becomes justifying your hatred for something. And yeah, that doesn't end well. But one more, Snow Crash, which is probably my most hated science fiction book that I did finish. I did get all the way through. And I do think if it was like 150 pages long, I would have liked it a lot more. But that beast was like 300. And by the end of it, I was tired of the shtick. I was tired of all the different shticks that Stevenson had in there. So let us revel in the shared animosity once more. Wow, that one I cannot read to you. My God. Julian here had it right. I should have done what they did. After 70 pages, I'm not getting along with this book, so off to the charity shop it goes. The prospect of reading 500 more is too much to bear. God bless you, Julian. Here we go. Naughty Boy says, juvenile nerd power fantasy in a nutshell. I'm a big fanboy of the cyberpunk genre. I should have liked this book. Instead, I can honestly say that I hate this book. And I also feel bad saying that about someone's work because it's almost like saying you hate someone's baby. That's fair. It's nice of you. Maybe it was all the hype I was exposed to before reading it, but I just could not shake a deep feeling of annoyance throughout 90% of this book. I found myself rolling my eyes a lot, and when I wasn't doing that, I was asking myself things like, do people really think this is the cyberpunk cream of the crop? How many pages to go? Agree with that one. And you know, when I finish a book and I don't like it, I kind of have this compulsion to go to Goodreads, find a 1-star review, find somebody that agrees with me in my opinion of this book, and then I'm satisfied in not liking it. And I understand that that's kind of a dangerous habit because my opinion of a book is only justified when somebody else has that same opinion of the book. So all that to say, I have seen every kind of opinion on Goodreads doing this video. So whatever opinion you have after reading a book, it's valid. If all these opinions can exist and be valid, then whatever yours is can be valid too. As I always say, reading is subjective. So many factors involved. Like what you like and don't like what you don't like. Anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.